Oh, okay, perfect, perfect, excellent. All right, excellent. All right, so we'll get on to the business of today. Welcome, everyone. So we have a very special guest with us, Sarah, who's going to talk about the company that she owns, FinTech, right?
Yeah.
We are cutting edge today.
Ooh,
We did
yeah.
aesthetics right before this, now FinTech. So
Love it.
let's give a nice warm round of applause to our guest. And I think we're going to start this off with a presentation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I'll,
So
I'll make it I'll make it kind of quick, but it just is like a little entree here, and then if we've got questions, cool. Otherwise, I'm ready to get grilled by you guys. And yeah, cool. All right. So one quick note on the slide: I'm actually the COO, and I do want to talk about that for a second. When I was in grad school and met my co-founder for the first time, so I was at Cornell 5-6 years ago, and met Emeraldo in the lobby, and we both stood out for different reasons. I obviously stood out in a formal business school setting, clearly, and he was loud, and immediately people were forming opinions about him. And I sat down and said, "I like you already. I want to work with you." And so we got to know each other over the course of the next year. We traveled the world together, and I said somewhere on that world trip between, I don't know, Istanbul and Israel, I do really seriously want to work with you on something. So when you have a startup idea, because you're the one with the ideas, you're always generating crazy schemes, I want to work with you on it. I'm the grounded doer. I like the operational stuff. I've always been attracted to the COO role. I don't just ideate unless I can actually do something with that. So I kind of knew that that synergy was going to work. And lo and behold, he called me up last year in April and was like, "So I got the idea. Are you ready?" So a little bit of a preview. But I'll tell you a little bit about Adro. I want to talk a little bit about my background because it's kind of crazy and weird and may not match what you think of when you think about entrepreneurs. But what I'm working on now is I'm the COO and co-founder of Adro, and we are a neobank, which means we are a digital bank. We are backed by a charter bank that is FDIC insured. We're like the tech layer on top of that, so we're a fintech. And we provide banking services to immigrants and international students, any folks who are coming to the US who don't have a social security number and may struggle to access traditional banking services, especially credit. So we saw this gap and really did our research, worked on this, realized, yeah, this is a real need. This is a market need out there. We can build something, and let's try to take this company as far as we can go. So far, we've raised about 1.5 million. We just heard that there may be some matching funds available from New York State that we'll be able to take advantage of. So we'll be raising a little bit more to give ourselves a real fighting chance of making this thing work. All right. So what I want to chat about quickly, and you guys may have heard bits and pieces of this throughout the day, is how do you get started in entrepreneurship? Some of you might be at different stages along a journey and know that you want to do it, aren't sure if you want to do it, don't know how to test out whether this is a good idea or not. And I want to talk about how to figure that out, how I figured it out, how I kind of went down this path in grad school and realized this is not the idea, and then how I knew when we were working on Adro that this idea had legs, that this was actually more viable. So my path to being a startup founder is not linear. I did not go from high school directly into a startup, or from college directly into a startup, or even from grad school directly into the startup world. I've been all over the place. I studied in undergrad. I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend this as the path to. Everyone's going to be different. I was a poetry major. I wrote a book of poems for my thesis in college. Wild. I've always been employed, knock on wood, although sometimes kind of zanily self-employed. And my first job out of school was effectively selling Sour Patch Kids and Swedish Fish to kids. That's crazy too. So I worked in media and advertising in New York. Great job. Got to work on sports and sponsorships for AT&T, where they gave us at one point $1 billion and said, "How do we spend this on media and marketing? How would you guys want to allocate this?" And we got to choose as the agency. So a pretty cool job, a lot of responsibility, also very analytical and data-driven. That's a theme throughout a lot of my work. Did that for a few years, realized maybe this wasn't the most challenging line of work, and I didn't necessarily feel a lot of job satisfaction. Also, the pay is terrible, spoiler alert. So I changed careers, I kind of pivoted drastically and went to work in healthcare IT. I went to work for a company based in Madison, Wisconsin that was and is still a private company, but one of the largest private companies in the US. If you have ever received medical care in the US, you have likely been involved or are in Epic. It's a medical record system. If you use MyChart, that's Epic. More than 85% of US health systems use it as their system of record. So really cool job, really cool campus. Got to do some great things there and learn a lot about company culture, how you build a company, how you scale a company. The company went from 3,000 to 10,000 people while I was there, and I was effectively in charge of a division of people by the time I left. So I really got to see, like, what's that like? What are the structures you have to put in place when you're managing 1,000 people? So I learned quite a bit about like hands-on management type stuff and operation stuff, as well as how to manage customers at scale. Did that for about 10 years. And my manager actually was the one who kind of pushed me out and said, you should go do other things. You know what the career path looks like here, and I think you're gonna get an itch to do something else. So I wanna write your grad school recommendations. And when your boss tells you that, you're like, okay, that's a good sign. Like, I'm gonna do that. So I went, off it was to grad school. I picked a school, went all in, applied, got my MBA, something I wanted to do. And then I went and I told myself during the MBA, I want to work in a startup afterwards. This is the plan. And I made that very public. And I didn't find any jobs. I was applying and I wasn't really kind of finding the thing I wanted to do and wasn't hearing back from some of these startups. And then I realized it's a hard thing to break into. It's a hard thing to get hired at a startup because if you're in that startup mode, you hire who you know and you really kind of work through referrals, or you're already working with such a small team and you rarely kind of bring new people on board. It's a big, high risk, high trust exercise. So I was like, you know what, the way that I'm gonna get into this is going to be starting it at some point. I think it's gonna be easier to start it myself than actually break in. So I'm gonna go do one more corporate job, learn what I can from that, and then the opportunity is gonna present itself. So I chose Amazon in part because a lot of people come out of Amazon and start their own companies. So it's a real hotbed of people who have the talent, the expertise, the network, the connections to do startups. So I can definitely confirm that because I was there about 4 years, and that was when I got the call from my now co-founder who was like, all right, the idea is here, are you ready? It also gave me a chance to kind of rebuild my financial footing after grad school, which was immensely helpful. So now I'm at Adro. Now I'm building doing the startup thing, and on a completely different path. All right, so you guys are welcome to ask me questions about any of that. I'll just blitz through these slides, or do you want to take a few now, maybe?
We have some questions.
Want to do that?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we got a microphone. We got to document this.
Yeah.
Ava, you got to document it.
Hello. Okay. Check. Let me see. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was not the voice of it, thank God. So one of the cool projects I got to work on at Amazon, I worked in the Alexa team, and it was very entrepreneurial, the work I did at Amazon. So I chose the teams and projects that were doing new stuff, which would set me up for success. So the first thing I did was help launch physical grocery stores, which was a new thing for Amazon. And the second thing I did on the Alexa team was work with businesses like senior living facilities and Disney to launch Alexa devices in the enterprise setting. Yeah. Yeah. So pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that not working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No, that's okay.
We'll have to be loud.
We can pass mine around, but are we out of questions?
No, we just started.
Okay. Well, I'll proceed then with this. We can always come back to my background, and you guys can grill me at any point. So I want to leave you with a couple. I've got 3-4 slides here. I want to talk about just how you find the right idea, how you vet it, and how you get started with entrepreneurship. I think this is important to talk about because a lot of people don't realize that this can be a really good way to approach it. And we often approach it in a very tangible way, or think you have to have a big idea and you have to have everything figured out before you begin. But really it starts with finding a problem and finding a need. This is so critical. So my advice to people who want to work on something is think about things you know and care about and find a problem that really, really resonates with you or with other people. It needs to be big enough and it needs to be painful enough that people are going to pay to fix it. And it can take a while to find a problem like this because there's a lot of little aches and pains that we encounter every day that we're like, oh, it's annoying. But when it comes down to it, I'm probably not going to change my life or pay to fix it. It's just annoying and I'm going to deal with it. But then there's other things where people are like, oh yeah, this is a big one and I wish someone would solve it. There are things right now I can think of specific features like that LinkedIn should have, or other kind of tools or things I'd use in my daily life that I'd be like, I'd pay money to see this solved right now. Those are the problems to attack. This got a little messed up. This is like 3 bullet points. The job of an entrepreneur is to solve a genuine problem. That is really it. First, if you can solve that problem, that's it. That's all it is. Maybe that's building a product at some point. Maybe that's a service. At this point in the process, though, you don't know what the solution looks like. You just have to identify the problem. Okay. Next up, get really, really curious about it. Get deep, get obsessed. So when I was talking with Amarildo in the early stages about Adro and what the idea kind of was, it was just a problem. It was international students and folks coming to the US, moving here, can't access banking services. And specifically, there are a lot of banks that just will not change their systems and will not make it easy and will not make it cost effective. Like, cool. So now let's go out and talk to these people. Let's get to know them. Let's get to know people all throughout the ecosystem, not just customers, but also the people on the banking side and the people at schools, and really understand how much of a problem this is. What are the specific pain points? Understand, like, is this big enough? Also, what are people doing today? If they can't solve this, what are they doing to work around it? And if you're hearing that they're doing all these crazy convoluted things, or they're trying to pay a lot of money to fix it and it's not working, these are signs that you're onto something. If people say, well, it's painful, but I don't really do anything about it, that may be a sign that maybe this isn't worth pursuing, or this might not be the most productive path. The other important question to ask is, why haven't other people solved it? Chances are, if you've got a good idea, someone else does too, and that's not a bad thing. We have competitors in our space. We have other companies that are doing almost exactly the same thing. That means there's room in this market. If nobody's doing the same thing, if it's completely open and blue ocean, ask why. Is it because it's extremely expensive to get in? Is it because no one's really thought of this out of all the 8 billion people on Earth? Or have people tried and failed? And what can you learn from their failures? One of the coolest things we did recently was actually talk to the CEOs and people at companies that exited or failed in our space. Talk to people who shut down, who never launched, who were trying to do similar things and pivoted, and said, what did you learn from that? What can you teach us? Why did you move away from this? Super interesting. Got a lot of really great feedback. Some of it was stuff that we had addressed. They said, we didn't negotiate great contracts. We didn't get good deals with these types of partners. That was something that we did a lot better. And some of them said, you have to watch out for X, Y, Z. And we said, wow, thank you. Those are things we haven't encountered yet that we need to watch out for or avoid. Huge. This is huge. And I think this is something that is a really easy trap to fall into. Don't build the product before you know what it needs to be. It's hard as humans. It's really hard as adults to do anything other than this, because we immediately think in terms of tangible stuff. When people tell us a problem, we always jump to what can we do to fix it? I think this is natural. And especially if you are an engineer, if you are a builder, if you love to work with your hands, you love to code, you like to make things, this is how the lens through which you're going to see the world. So I think one adage I like to keep in mind is, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think about it as like a framing tool. If you're trained a certain way, you look at the world through that lens. You solve problems through that lens. It's important to know that, recognize that, and say, sometimes I need to not look through that lens. I need to take those glasses off, and I need to think about it and just listen and see if there's another solution or a better solution or a cheaper solution. I hear a lot, like a good example of this is, I was pitched yesterday I do some investing on the side, and someone reached out on LinkedIn and said, I've got a great new product. I've got a website. I've built this. I've got an app. I have all this stuff stood up. What it is it's a mental health app to help you stay off your phone. And I took a breath, and I was like, so it's an app that I'm going to use every day to teach me how to not use my phone, to stay off my phone. She's like, yeah, it's great. And I was like, we just need to pause and think about the irony of this. Was this the right solution? Is this the answer? And when you're in that mode, she's an engineer, and so that's her tendency. She's like, I wanted to build this thing, and now I want to find out who's the best user for it. That's tough to do. It's hard to have something and then to try to force fit it. It's much easier when you have a problem and then you start brainstorming the solution collaboratively with the people who will use it. So the other thing you do at this stage too is you have to prove there's a need or try to disprove it. This is something that Amazon teaches pretty regularly when they're doing internal entrepreneurship, is really try to disprove your hypothesis. You know, you want to go out there and find all the evidence and the risks that indicate this won't be successful, and then you figure out how to make your idea stronger. Yeah, so I kind of touched on this, but don't build something before you know there's a real need. If you do build something and then try to force fit it, you're not listening to feedback as much anymore. There's one caveat, and this may or may not apply to some of you, but in the kind of hard sciences space, in the pharmaceutical and medical space, sometimes scientists will discover cool stuff in the lab. It just kind of happens. I mean, that's how we have penicillin. That's how we have a lot of other drugs and great medical discoveries. So when this happens, there's an opportunity to sometimes to commercialize or market those, to say, what can we do with this cool new thing that we accidentally found? In that case, a lot of money and time has already been spent on vetting it, and so there is value in finding a need for that, but that's probably the one exception case. With a lot of technology, it's the opposite way, where we should find the need first and then build to that need because it's super flexible. Last tip I have for entrepreneurship, don't ever stop talking to customers. You do this from the beginning, and you do this all the way through until you shut the company down. And even then, when you shut the company down, you should ask for feedback and apologize and talk to them and, you know, tell them about the next thing you're gonna do. We talk to customers every day now that we're live and supporting them, but we talk to them throughout the whole journey and the whole process to get feedback. Most valuable, important thing you can do. One thing I don't see on the board over there, I was looking at all the different terms that apply to entrepreneurs. One of them I would add is listener, or just say your ears are open all the time. You're always listening for that feedback, those next product suggestions. All your feature ideas, they come from customers. Yeah. Yeah, they're buying, yeah. All right, so that's my spiel. I want to open it up for questions and, you know, and chatting.
Yeah, did we get the, yes, well done, excellent.
That one should be working.
Did we get the other microphone working? Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, good, good. Yeah, I have some, well, I'll begin the question. I have lots of questions. So thank you, that was really insightful, and it actually parallels a lot of the discussions that we're having in this class. So perfect timing as well. We just ended last week with this emphasis on empathy. You have to understand what your customer's up to. This is the first step of the design thinking process. And it's essential, right? Because if you're not talking to your customers, right, then you're making assumptions that could be wildly off base. And so it's great, right, that this is really validation of the necessity of adopting this approach. Also, you mentioned what I found really interesting, that you were able to speak to other entrepreneurs who failed in this area. Now, you're in like fintech, so there's like a lot of visibility in this space, right? So you can probably find out what the other companies are. There's sort of public disclosures of funding and things like that. So how did you go about even putting that together and reaching out and speaking to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Google, is a way.
Yeah.
You just sort of search and see, you search different combinations of terms. What are the terms that your customers or you would search to find your company or idea? They're the same ones they're going to search to find your competitors. And so then we did also Google like failed fintech in international banking and stuff. We talked to partners at every step of the way and ask them, have you heard of other companies who tried to do this? Our own banking partner actually was working with someone prior to us who tried to do it and failed, and so that was perfect. So they actually could put us in touch. So sometimes it's like you're actually going to stumble along these things, but you can search it. You can find old Google web pages, like archived pages of companies that went under. So you could find and dig that up, and then actually look at the marketing material they were putting out there. And then articles. There's so many, the beneficial thing about most startups is we're all hungry for press and attention and trying to publish stuff or get out there if there's a social media trail. So there is definitely more of a trail for a lot of different companies now that you can just find by searching. And talking to customers is another way too. Have you ever tried any other products? Did you try any other, in our case, what other banks did you use? What other financial services products did you use? And we got some answers from there as well.
Was there a willingness for them to talk about? Because this is not them sort of celebrating their successes. This is about admitting to maybe some mistakes they made or just the failures that they experienced. So they were willing to. Yeah, I mean, so because we've actually been talking about in our class, just it's unexpected, but there's so many people out there that just want to help others, right? And networking is all about just reaching out to people, just making that contact, and you'd be surprised how open some people are. And so, did you get a lot of pushback? Was it difficult for them to?
There were a few cases where people were a little hesitant. Obviously, they didn't want to share the extent of certain failures.
Right.
But in many cases, some of them needed jobs, so they're like, "Hey, if you guys are hiring, we have experience in this space." And in some cases, that might be a good move. In other cases, we're like, "Not so much. You did things that were questionable, and that's why you failed."
Yeah.
But in some cases, it was like, "Yeah, actually, we do want to stay in touch. The timing was wrong, or there was something that was kind of out of your control, and that just sucked." So yeah, there generally I find that the entrepreneurial ecosystem is friendly and is about sharing, because partnerships are how you get things done. Relationships are important, and you're all kind of working together. Even if you're competitive in a space, you're going to keep seeing each other. And let's carve out more room for both of us to be successful. There is typically enough room at the table. If the market is so small that there's not room for a couple players, then that may not be the market you want to go into anyway.
Yeah. And so some of the people that you spoke to, I guess, were just like employees, or they weren't necessarily. Yeah, there's so much intelligence that can be gained from talking to them. So it's a great way, first of all, just to understand a industry that you want to enter as an entrepreneur. But it's also a great way to network if you want a job.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of these people wanted to talk because this is a way of them networking. So this is what we discussed last week. There's just a lot of opportunity there, just reaching out and connecting to people, and people are willing to help others. Everyone's trying to, move forward in their lives and in their careers. So there's a willingness.
True.
To that,
And
yes.
we're lucky that we're in this area in the greater New York or tri-state region. Networking is an accepted thing. It's transactional many times, but we all know how to do it. We show up to events, and there's no shame in asking, "Hey, can we connect on LinkedIn? Hey, let's talk and exchange emails. Let me email you and follow up." That is understood here. So do it. Take advantage of the fact that is the currency of how we do business. And it's a really easy thing to do. And people are always like, "Yeah, sure, why not? No harm in that." And then I can kind of follow your journey and vice versa.
And the other thing I want to circle back to is when you began, it was really interesting that you highlighted that you're not the CEO, you're the COO. But you make a distinction between the idea person and the operational person.
Yeah.
So this hits home with me because I'm the opposite. I'm the idea person. I don't want to run anything. I don't want to operate anything. I hate managing, right? And so I delegated almost all of this. And I say I want to be the chair of everything and the CEO of nothing, right? And so, and we play different roles, right? And it's important to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, so that you can get people who. I'm also an introvert.
Same.
And
Same.
so. like I know that about myself, right? And as an entrepreneur, you need to be this grand promoter. It requires a lot of extroversion, which I don't have, and so
It's tough.
I would hire people to do that. I would
Same.
hire people to do the networking for me.
Yeah.
Like they would do. And so, yeah, so it's important, right, to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and that you don't have to be everything, right? And especially within entrepreneurship, there's maybe partnerships you can forge
Yes.
with people who are complementary to what your strengths are.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, and this partnership, though, it was serendipitous. It wasn't, right? And so much of life is like this, right?
Yeah.
It's just about getting out there, and things just happen, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah, you do create those opportunities though. Like the more you get out there, go to events, show up, network. Now I know this whole community of immigrant entrepreneurs in New York who are working on services for newcomers to the U.S. Like there's a sort of cabal of us who go around to events together, and it's powerful. Like we're a powerful team that can cross promote each other's work and share funding sources and help each other all be successful because a rising tide lifts all boats. So that the more you put yourself out there, the more you go to things and like play the role, it works. And I will say I've started to, like, it takes a while sometimes to get going. Like I've been kind of on the, all right, LinkedIn post hustle and like all the event going like multiple times a week for months now. And it's finally kind of yielding those results where people are saying, hey, come speak, do this. Like it takes a while to get there, and it can be tiring, especially if you're introverted. I come across as extroverted. I am not. I am definitely going to like pass out on the train back to New York tonight. Like just I'm going to need that time to recover. But especially if you are a person within the company, if you are the CEO or another role, and you have what's known as founder product fit, you are very intrinsically linked to the product in some way. So for instance, my CEO and co-founder is an immigrant himself. He's worked in payments. He is the story of this company, he embodies it in a way that no one else does to a level that's a really high degree. People want to speak to him all the time. That's tough. He can't delegate that out as easily.
Right.
So he knows that when someone calls up and says, hey, we want someone to speak to this, it's got to be him. And so that is the one caveat to that. If you're doing something that's very much linked to your own identity and that's part of the story, be prepared to be prepared to be that person, and you got to do it.
It's also good, and Ava, we'll get to your question. It's also good to validate that even introverts, right, can play these different roles and can generate a lot of success as an entrepreneur, a lot of success as a leader, right? It's just not something only exclusively for extroverts. So for all of you introverts, right, this is a pathway worth exploring. Do we have?
Let me see if this works. Testing.
Oh, it is. All right, good, excellent.
We're just burning through mics here.
I know I asked a lot of questions.
But great questions, great questions, yes.
I do like what sometimes I like to watch stuff about people coming home from prison. It's like it's so hard to find a job afterwards. I can't help. Despite what they've done, I can't help but feel a little sorry for them because they want to do better for themselves when they can't. So I found that entrepreneurship is very easy. It's almost easier for them because they're the ones in charge. Can you speak to that? Like, what do you think about people who want to have a second chance in life?
Yeah. Interestingly, I'm in a group now. I got into this NASDAQ program for entrepreneurs around the U.S. and the world, kind of building innovative products with a social justice component. And 2 of the people in my cohort of 11 are actually working on anti-recidivism projects. So super, super cool. And they're trying to figure out ways to help people rise out of circumstances like that and be more financially stable. Entrepreneurship can absolutely be an answer to a lot of things. I think the things you need to be successful here, you have to be resilient. You have to just keep working at that idea. If you are willing to listen, if you find a problem, and you believe in it and you chase after it, that's manageable. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Microphone.
Wait, John. We got to document this, John.
Sarah, one of the questions I have is everybody thinks that this is the magic idea that that starts in the beginning is what you are going to market with. So could you please talk a little bit about the journey from the original idea that puts people together to what actually manifests itself in the marketplace when you launch and keep evolving?
Yeah, don't get too attached to your original idea or your original solution or product because it's going to change. That's where, again, starting with the problem helps you get closer to that final product. I think earlier helps you find that product market fit faster because you're really responding to true needs. But pivots are normal. I think most businesses go through that. We haven't had any kind of hard pivot yet where it's been like, whoa, we took the company in a completely different direction. But I have many kind of friends in the space who have people who, and we talked to others kind of who've left the space who did the same thing. So one company that we're friendly with is called Ellis, and they started as a fintech for immigrants coming to the U.S. as well, and then realized we don't know banking that well, and we don't know how to do this. Also, we don't know that this is the biggest need. What we're hearing is visas really are hard. And visa caps are really a challenge. So they pivoted into that. So they said, wow, we're going to respond to that need. And they're doing really well in that. But they kind of had a lot of funding dry up, and it took them a while before they realized, oh, we gotta switch. We gotta change this. And so it's never too late to make that change. Whenever you realize this isn't working and we have to change something about it, be open to it because that's totally normal. And that is actually a question investors will often ask. How have you pivoted this product?
I actually have two questions. So the first one is about kind of linking what you just said. How do you kind of not get attached, but still, you mentioned being obsessed with the idea. How do you kind of find that balance between find the drive, but not getting too attached to the initial idea?
Be obsessed with the customers and the problem, not the product. The product just reflects and is a response to what the customers want. So I care first about this customer archetype and these humans who have a specific challenge. And when you can keep specific people in mind that you've talked to, that makes that a lot easier. I can be like, oh, I'm thinking about Rahul. I'm thinking about Taj. I'm thinking about some of these people who I know. And I'm like, all right, that hits home. Like, what would they do? What would they want? And that takes the ego, I think, out of some of the product design piece.
Okay. And my second question is more about Adro rather than your journey. I'm your target market. I'm an international student. I currently use Revolut, but how do you differentiate yourself from someone like Revolut?
Yeah, good question. So Revolut is huge, growing. Definitely keeping an eye on them. One of the things that we do, we are more traditional banking products. So getting a checking account, which is a way that you can get paid if you have a job here. Helping build credit before you have a social security number. You need credit if you're going to apply for an apartment or even a job at some point in the U.S. Gets checked for so many different things. So we focus. I mean, there are other payment tools you can use that are a good stopgap for the first few months or for certain circumstances. But if you really want to establish and build your life here, you're going to need some of those more traditional banking products in the long term, and building credit as early as you can is immensely helpful because one of the factors in a high credit score is how long you've had it, how long you've been building it. So at this point, our understanding is that Revolut does not help with that full spectrum of services. They're a payment solution. Yeah.
Thank you.
Who had their hand raised? Oh, yeah, yes, James. If you want to get a little closer to your mouth.
I'm also your target market. Do you do like currency conversions or just credit mainly? Like I use Wise, not sure if you know what that is.
Yeah,
And
so
they just do conversions but not credit.
we work with a lot of money movement partners to help with the actual currency conversions at this point. But one thing that we do is we don't charge for inbound wire transfers, knowing that is expensive. And most banks, especially the large ones, will charge you up to $25, $50 in some cases for an inbound wire transfer. So, yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. So this is another kind of good point is when we're thinking about product features that we can offer and what can we do, I know there's bigger needs. I know there's really expensive, challenging needs out there. Some of those are really expensive or hard to address. So for instance, getting a money movement license to be able to move money cross-border or to handle some of the currency conversion stuff could cost us $1 million or more, which we don't want to spend at this point, and it may require additional licensing that we don't want to pursue, and that's not an area that we're as familiar with. So instead, we figured out other ways that we could help while we can figure out a long-term plan for addressing some of those other needs. As a startup, you're always going to have to pick and choose. You're always going to have to say what you can do with your limited time and resources, and then make that roadmap. And that is a hard thing. That's always painful. And it's like, I know that's a need too, and I want to get there, but I can't get there right now.
Before we get to the next question, can you speak to, so you identify this need, right? And it's clear that this is an issue, but this seems pretty complicated. You are trying to connect to this highly regulated like technology industry. It might seem daunting or overwhelming or impossible for an entrepreneur who doesn't have this expertise to pull something like this off. If you identified a need in this very complicated industry, how do you get to the point where you can actually understand how to create a solution?
Yeah, I think this is an area where having people on the team who have this expertise is crucial. To an extent, our team is building what we know because we have multiple experts on the team who've worked in payments and banking adjacent spaces for years. That's another piece of crucial advice here is build something that you do know, that you do have personal experience with or a connection to or some sort of tie to. That makes that story stronger when you say, I've worked in this, I know this. So when my CEO gets up and says, I worked at MasterCard for almost a decade, and our CTO is like, yeah, I worked standing up a lot of the payment structures at Uber, and then I went and worked at another fintech. Our engineers worked at fintechs prior to this. Like there is a strong story there where we know that environment. Can you learn a new environment? Absolutely. I came in with probably the least amount of financial experience and learned it, but my role also isn't as I'm not required to know that in the same way that our CTO has to, for example. You can hire expertise. So we do know that even within our team, one of our blind spots is regulatory, and regulatory changes a lot. So unless we were spending, it was our full-time job, we weren't going to be as on top of it as this person that we know in our network who's amazing and we hired on a contract basis. We're like, hey, Chris, like, you're awesome. Please help us with this. Like, we'll need a few hours of your time per month. And in your day job, you manage this for a much larger company. So you're going to have insight into what we should do. So there's still things that we even outsource.
And then when you look to raise funds, since you've gone through that, right, so much of their decision making is based on the people I'm invested in, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's the people that I'm invested in, not so much the product, right?
Yes, exactly. We raised almost all of our money before we had a product.
Yeah.
So we had to go into these conversations saying, this is who we are, and this is what we're telling you we're going to build, and it's not built yet. So a lot of it was just on the strength of our backgrounds and the assessments they did, and just how we talked together and how we worked together. So that was crucial. So coming in with something that you know or you have background in, you're selling yourself as much as you're selling the product.
Yeah, I mean, the people are going to be the engine that generates whatever success, and so there's going to be challenges, there's going to be failures. Maybe there might be these major pivots. So you want to invest in people that know is going to be able to come up with a solution.
Yes.
You know, not just today, but in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we had a question over here,
Good. Excellent.
and then I have a question.
Oh, good.
How's it going? I was thinking more like you've worked in like the corporate space your whole life. Now that you've moved into like basically working for yourself, do you find you have more time or like less time for yourself?
Ooh, it's a good question. I probably spend more time on work stuff now. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're building your own business, if you stop, the company stops in a big way. At some point, you get large enough where you have enough of a team that you can rely on others to help push it forward when you take a break. But we at this point we're not quite there yet, so it is we always feel like we're on, or we're always being vigilant, even if we're taking that time off or it's a weekend or a bank holiday. We still have customers coming to us with questions and needs. We still want to stay on top of the news. We still want to know what's going on in the world that could affect us. So it's different. Like working a corporate job, like I don't want to ding it too much, because there are some benefits when you're working at a large company, and you can take a day. You need a sick day, like that's okay. Someone's going to cover you. The world will not stop. But in a startup world, we have to think, what are the trade-offs if I do take a day and completely unplug? It may be important and necessary, but there could be some consequences if I ignore some email that someone is really expecting me to get to, or ignore customer support. Yeah.
Okay, so I have another student, but I have a quick question about cryptocurrency. Would that be a solution?
It's challenging. So crypto is not regulated well in the U.S. right now, and it's not allowed within banking chains. So if you're not really able to use that to move money and to convert freely between crypto and then fiat currency, or tangible like USD. So I would love to see it be a solution, because it could be a really great option for moving money out of countries with unstable currencies. I know that we have a lot of students coming from countries in Africa where the currency fluctuations make it really difficult to afford school here. And being able to save money in a US dollar pegged coin could be helpful. We're not there yet. I think it's 5 to 10 years off before that's really going to be something that's viable. I'm optimistic about it. What's also really interesting is that Bitcoin and crypto was like the hot thing 5, 6, 7 years ago, and now we're seeing, of course, AI as the new hype cycle. And so we're seeing kind of all the crypto stuff mature and start to get a little bit more integrated into the fibers of what's regulated, but it's still not 100% there. And I think AI is also going to be one of those things where a lot of energy, a lot of interest. It's going to take a while to sort out all of the legal and like regulatory pieces that are going to make it more widely accepted, or help people figure out how to use it effectively.
What are the ways in which you market Adro, and what's the kind of marketing presence among campuses around the country?
Yeah, great question. Marketing is always a challenge at startups. You want to figure out the most efficient way to do it early on. It can be a money pit. It can be a place where you spend a lot of money and endless amounts to get your message out there. What you want to avoid is what's called like a spray and pray approach, where you're like, let's just buy ads online and see what happens. You do really want to be thoughtful and figure out what's the best way who are the channels or the people or the places we can sell through that reach the most of our target customer. And so for us, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like international students, they come to schools. So we should talk to schools, and that's been a big piece of what we do. And then the next question is, well, how do you reach the most schools at one time? How do you talk to them? What about conferences that people go to? And that has been a great channel for us. So when you're thinking about marketing, think about who are your most hungry customers, who are the people that are going to buy this and become advocates for you, or use it and become advocates, and then where do they go? And it may be easy stuff. It might be like, man, they're all in this Reddit community, and they're all online, and you can find them there. Or maybe they're all part of a specific kind of group that you can reach. Sometimes it's harder, and sometimes you do have to go to a more individualized approach. But many times there's some sort of aggregator. There's some sort of place you can go. But for us, it's like a mix of there's traditional stuff, like showing up at conferences and having face-to-face meetings. And then there's also some online stuff. I know that we should do more with social media, but that's a tough choice too, because we don't have a lot of time now too. So I'm like, oh, do I want to make a reel today? What will that do for me? We're always kind of weighing the benefits and trade-offs of everything.
Yes. Have you considered by any chance integrating artificial intelligence into your business as well? And would you trust AI to give financial advice?
Yeah,
or-
AI. AI is a tool. So I think the first question is, what do we need? And then the next follow-up question is AI the right thing for it? The areas where I see AI being useful to us could be in customer support. So we actually have the tool we use, Intercom, is a common system that's out there for customer support. Right now, we staff the team where it's human-driven support, but we could introduce AI. We've had enough conversations with people, and we have enough kind of responses written and FAQ documents that we could probably feed it in and generate some pretty darn good responses that make sense and aren't offensive, and people would like that. So I think we'll probably start there as like customer support chats, because it's clear to me that our customers are already expecting the chat part of the support to be AI, because they immediately start and they'll say human. Or be like, or just start with like looking for SOP on X, and it's like, okay, so you know how this works. I can tell that you're savvy to the system. So that's probably the first place, is like, where will this be either expected or not noticed? But there are areas that I don't know that I'd introduce that I wouldn't necessarily let AI say, like, vet our customers and say, oh yeah, let's have AI just like review all the passports and the documentation and automatically approve customers. That feels like that's a little too risky right now. But maybe eventually. Never know.
Anyone else? Okay.
I just had to ask, how do you not stay complacent with your company's success? But I know as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking ahead, but how do you stay in the present without getting complacent?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, our CEO, like the ideas guy, is always coming up with net new ideas. Hey, what if we tried this? So like we keep each other on our toes to some extent. You got to have one person in the team who's just like constantly like ideating and thinking, and then kind of up to the rest of the team to figure out how we want to harness and use that. Our customers are the other source of all new input and info. Customers are never going to let you just like rest on your laurels or keep the product the way it is. They're always going to suggest new stuff. They're always going to say, can you do this? What about this? And ask for more. Your partners, if you're working with business partners, which we do, will also do that too. Hey, what if we did this? What if we took this to the next level? And then if all else fails, your investors will also ask and push for that. So you get some external pushing, but also ideally you've got someone on your team. If it's not you, it's somebody else who's like, hang on, I have an idea. I was looking over some stuff, looking over some reports, looking at the customer feedback, and I have some thoughts. So it comes from all different sources, but we all take turns being the one who pokes.
And can you please share how you, as the head of operations, balance the ideation part with, cash in the bank, prioritization, etc.? Because I think that probably falls in your realm, right?
Yeah. It's a constant, it's not a struggle per se. It's something you always have to kind of think about and ask a lot of questions around. So when we've got a new idea as a team, or when we're talking about changing course, I try to think about like, all right, what other things are on the list, and can we incorporate this without bumping anything to the bottom, or does something have to give? And if something's going to give, what is it? Of these other 5 things, which one of these is the least important? I'm a project manager by training, so some of that is a little bit natural at this point, where I'm like, all right, we only have so much time. Is this going to be the most important thing? Does this need to get done today, or could this wait? Is there a deadline? So I usually ask like, what's the timing on it? And then look at you should always have some sort of running list or some place where you're like keeping like, what do we need to do this week, this month, or for whatever time period, and then you're able to quickly evaluate that. My calendar too, live and die by that, and I can look at that and say, all right, if we need to do this today, when does this get done? Like, what could move? Do we have to go to this event? Could one of us go to this and not both? Yeah.
Anyone else? Jeff?
I got questions. I always got questions.
Keep going.
So you mentioned project management. How entrepreneurial do you get to be as a project manager? Is that a viable way to sort of scratch that entrepreneurial itch without taking on the responsibility and risk or whatever as a first step?
It can be. I think product roles might be closer to it, because you get to work with an engineering team, come up with ideas, work with customers to develop a roadmap. But increasingly, program and project managers get to do that type of work within a company. So at a larger corporation like an Amazon or a Google, often there are a lot of really cool inventive projects that you can work on that let you experience how to structure something, how to make something happen. And that's an important skill at a startup. I think it's underrated in sort of the general like ethos and the storytelling we hear about startups. What we like to talk about in the US is like the solo CEO entrepreneur who comes up with the idea and does it all. But in reality, the companies that have been the most successful are the ones that have a lot of really strong operators. And you've got someone who's a great ideas person, but also a lot of really good executors underneath that who know how to turn that into reality or say, well, let's shape this a little bit. Let's kind of like make this a little bit more practical and let's blend this with some of the data and the feedback. So I think those are great and important skills to have. They're not the flashy ones. They're not the ones we talk about, but they're really critical. It does require more storytelling also to paint yourself as entrepreneurial when you have those types of roles on your resume. I think that's not always, again, associated in the mythos, but you just have to say, no, I absolutely love this entrepreneurial space and I love building and inventing things, but guess what? I also get things done. I also know how to execute. I know how to hit deadlines.
So you not as bullish on founder mode? Is that what you're?
No.
Is that what I detect?
That's actually a great question. So I'm working with a mentor as part of this NASDAQ program, and that was the first article he had me read and we discussed in our first meeting. And I immediately I read it and I'm like, nope, disagree. There's elements of it that are important. You do have to be really committed to your idea. You do have to be all in on it. But I think there's risks in being so linked to your idea and your company and your startup that you can't separate yourself from it. It becomes a cult of personality, or it becomes difficult for you ever to transition or change that company because people see you as that company. An example of that is people still talk about in the news. I can't tell you how many articles I read that people still associate Jeff Bezos very strongly with Amazon. Yeah. He's not the CEO. That's Andy Jassy. That's changed. That was years ago. Yeah. And people still don't realize that or recognize that. They cannot separate him from that company, even though he's tried to. That's the risk of founder mode, is that the company cannot grow and emerge and get to that next stage. One of the hardest things to do and the most important things you can do in your career is know when it's time to step down, to hand over the reins of leadership to somebody who's going to do the next job or see the company to the next phase. And founder mode makes that very difficult. Yeah. So it makes it hard for the company, if it's going to scale, to get to that next level and then to move on and advance if you're not the right leader 10 years down the road.
Yeah, and I think that's true even for smaller companies who struggle with that transition. You don't have to be a massive, company with thousands of employees. It's something that I went through sort of personally, but given my resistance to being an operator, it was easier. But I know lots of entrepreneurs who struggle with that, and they can't scale. They can't scale because that. It's a
company's
problem.
different at 1 person, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. It's a very different animal. And if you're a CEO who's an inventor and an ideas guy, you don't want to run a 1,000-person company. That's right. That's my game. I love that. Oh, we're gonna have process. We're gonna have documents. We're gonna do things in a really structured way. That's different. Yeah, and you're like, nope, get me out of there. And that's normal. That's okay. You want to be able to do that, but if the company is you and your identity, they won't let you go.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So it's a challenge. Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Have you ever second guessed yourself?
No. All the time. All the time. Yeah. No. I mean, I think that's normal. You kind of have to be optimistic in this field to want to succeed, but you should also be honest about the risks. And there's a lot of times early on, especially when we're just getting our teeth kicked in by investors, and we're like, we have nothing. We have an idea. We're having meetings, and people are like, yep, I don't believe this. I don't want to listen to this. There was one investor who started cleaning her desk during the call. We should have just hung up. It was so clear. She just was so disinterested. We're like, cool, this is going well. And so you had a lot of those, but you have to remember sometimes it takes a lot of no's before you get to yes. All you need is a couple yeses, though. You just need one or two in some cases. But it was really difficult in those early days, especially when you're just not getting traction and you don't have anything to fall back on, and we didn't have a product or customers. So you feel like you're just making it up. And then once you get going, it's a little easier to be more optimistic and see the positive. But there are a lot of elements of doing this job. Sales is another one that can be really tough and miserable. And if someone had told me that before I started, like, hey, you're going to do some sales and you're going to really dislike it and it's going to be painful, those first failures and all the learning with that, I may not have tried it, but glad I stuck with it. But there are parts that you're like, ooh, this is rough while I'm learning.
Do you have someone that you rely on with sales? Like you're my go-to person?
Yeah, I mean, my network from school, friends, like I think also going in blind and just experimenting and learning is important too, because if you listen to people who tell you, man, this thing's going to be really hard and terrible, it might scare you off. And that's kind of why we do this crazy thing, because we're like, we don't always know. We don't always know what that road's going to look like, and we just give it a try and work through it. But yeah, I mean, I've certainly built up more of a team and ask for help. I mean, people are always willing to give that. So one of the best things we did recently was sat down with a buddy who knew customer relationship management tool, HubSpot, really well. And we're like, how do you use it? Show us all your tricks. And he's like, yeah, this is awesome. He was excited about it. We learned a ton. So for sure.
Sara, if the majority of the students here is like undergrad, right? So as an entrepreneur, what would you wish to know when you were 20 years old or 21 years old? Like, what would you advise your 21-year-old self?
Yeah, I love this question because I think about this a lot. You can be an entrepreneur at any point in time. And a lot of the most successful companies were started by folks who are older. I am 40. So this is not too late. If you don't have an idea now, you think you want to do this and you're like, oh, if I don't do it now, I'm going to miss my chance. It's not true. Like, practice, learn, try your hand at it now. See if it's something that you're kind of interested in. You can come back to it whenever. You can go, if you go and work in the corporate world, it does not mean this is closed off to you. In fact, you might just be preparing yourself to be super successful at it later on. If you have an idea and you're doing something now, awesome. Love it. Like that, you can absolutely be successful now, but you can also be successful later. So I think that's something I'm glad you're here and you're listening to this and immersing yourself in it. Know it's an option. Know that it's never not an option for you. You can start a company when you're 50 or 60. In fact, then you'll have the network, the resources, the money, the time, and you might really just blow it out of the water then. So you can wait till the right idea comes along and the right team, and that could take time. Or you could get super lucky and it's now for you.
So speaking of which, so part of the appeal of becoming an entrepreneur is you can generate a lot of wealth, right? There's an exit maybe. So I wonder if you can speak to how much of that motivates you to be an entrepreneur, and then what kinds of plans you have for this company for achieving certain financial goals.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, that's like a little piece of it. Like we're hopeful and optimistic for that. You don't go into it saying like our goal is to fail. We want to lose as much of our own and other people's money as possible. No, we're to some extent like our networks, and we got friends and family who've put in on this, and that's on the line. So we're not. If this is not successful, we're gonna have to go back to them and be like, man, like I'm sorry, and thanks for believing in us, and we're gonna do something else, and that's hard. So we do want this to work, but we also recognize there's other benefits, even if it's moderately successful, or we're able to make it somewhat profitable and break even on it. That's still really a great learning experience that we would be able to leverage to do the next thing, which we're already have some vague ideas about. So it's I think it's a piece of it. It can't be your only piece, because the truth is a lot of startups fail. And so you really want to go into it and believing and optimistic, but also realistic that it's hard. And you do need to make sure that you're not putting all of your eggs in that basket. So I have savings. I have not cashed out my 401k to do this. I haven't, put all of my money in it. Some people do that, and it can be risky. It may work. I would say, keep some of that separate. I'm really glad that we raised capital from friends and family, and we were extremely explicit when we did that this is high risk, and don't put in more than you can afford to lose. That was a really important component of that initial angel round, was being really clear that don't gamble on this one. We want to be successful, and us, we're going to work hard, but don't put your retirement money in on this.
So that was all angel funding that.
And the initial, like 200,000.
Oh,
so
okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
just small amount. The rest was venture capital.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And so what do potential exits look like then?
Yeah, so I mean, there's like really two options. You get acquired by a larger company or a private equity firm, or you go public. Going public is a tough route for us because we'd have to probably become a bank, which is expensive. So getting all the licensure, maybe buying a branch, like what does that look like? That's a path, but it is one that takes a lot of money. It is more likely that we have a lot of components of our business model and technology that we've created that are sellable, that are attractive to an investor or to an existing bank who would like to grow their market and be a real player in the kind of customer base that we've built. So as we develop more tools, our tech team has been super creative about creating a really elegant platform and figuring out how we work with partners and building out a lot of cool tools that we might be able to monetize in creative ways. So for us, it's more likely going to be acquisition.
Okay, and then so are you strategic in designing your company and the products you offer to have that eventual appeal to being? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're at that point now that we've taken venture capital. That becomes a question you get asked when you're raising money at that level. What does an exit look like? Who are you targeting? How are you building towards that? So if we have specific banks or buyers in mind, we should approach them about funding. Like that's really what the expectation is at that point. Like you want to be bought by M&T, you want to be bought by Chase. Well, talk to them and get them on your cap table. Actually have them invest in you now and grow and watch you and be very personally invested to make that process easier. We also thought about other things we could do when we were setting up the company to make an acquisition or even an IPO easier. The more structures you have in place that are like clear and vetted, for instance, having a real cap table, having all the investors like tracked really well in a system that is well known, using an HR system for payroll, not just sort of doing it off the side of your desk, like things like that, so that when you get audited or when you kind of go through that process, they look at it and say, oh, thank God it's all clean. I know you've paid your taxes. So yes, we thought about some of those things, and they're not cheap choices, but it does set you up for that future path out.
Yeah. I mean, because it's just interesting to consider for like a new entrepreneur that it's not always about necessarily like a profit that you make, that there could be these other exit goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And like even if the startup isn't successful, there's also this option too that you've done a really crazy, insane thing that you're going to take these skills with you into another job. The other reality of getting acquired too, or making an exit, is typically now you're working in a corporate job again.
Right.
So if you have an IPO, now you're a corporation and a public corp that has accountability. If you get acquired, you're likely working for another public
right.
company, and you have that accountability, and you often have to work for them for a few years. So you kind of, no matter what, as an entrepreneur, you likely can't escape that environment. So you have to be able to navigate that for at least a little while.
And then how does the investment community, how is your reputation affected within the investment community by a failure?
It's not necessarily the be all end all, like, oh, we will never talk to you again. They want to see how far you got, what you learned from the experience, what you learned from a failure, a pivot, a change, a setback is huge. They're always going to ask that question and understand, like, what can you do better? What would you do differently? Sometimes failures are not within your control. For example, the COVID pandemic killed a lot of things, and that wasn't something anyone really saw coming. And that was tough. There were some businesses that were like set to open or just opening in February 2020, and that was really tough. And so looking back on that, you can say this wasn't just me. This was really poor timing, and sometimes it is you. And if that's the case, be really clear about it. Be humble about it. Be honest about it. We made a wrong choice here. This is what we didn't do, and then we made sure that we're not going to do that again. Now we look for X, Y, Z.
Right. Okay. I mean, because you probably don't want to string failures together, but I mean, it's definitely a culture. I mean, investors understand it's just high risk. Not everything's under your control, and if they feel like it was, you did your best and it was operated well, and that this is good talent, that there may be opportunities in the future. Yeah.
You have experience, and you can say we're serial entrepreneurs.
That's
There's
right.
a lot of ways to spin it.
That's right. and spin is important, right? I mean, because it's all about image.
Yeah.
And you have full control over how you craft your image. You don't know how it's going to be received.
Right.
Right. But if you don't put any effort into that, right, then you're ceding control, 100% of it, to others.
That's right.
So that's all important.
Yeah.
Creating a narrative.
That's right.
Yeah, really, really interesting.
I like to. I want to add on that because I think I've chosen, you saw a little bit about my career path, and I feel like I've chosen to play life on hard mode sometimes because I haven't stayed in the same industry. I've made choices that make me not look like a fit for corporate America. It takes more work to tell my story. My story is not clear on paper. When people look at my resume, they can't figure out what kind of animal I am. I have to choose that, and I have to help people understand that. Is it doable? Absolutely. Is it more work? Also, yes. It gives me a lot of flexibility, but it's not as simple as, man, I've had the straight arrow career where I majored in finance, I worked in finance, I continued to work in finance, and I moved up the ladder. Like, that's really easy, and people get that. And if you're kind of playing outside that box, it's doable, it's fun, but you do have to nail storytelling.
Yeah, really interesting. Ben.
Learn like crazy, look for resources whether it's daily newsletters that I get, reading the news, digging in on whatever industry specific content that I can, joining with different groups, finding mentors within that. There's a lot of resources, thankfully, for women in fintech in New York, and I love to go to those meetups and talk to people who've been doing it longer than I have. So I really try to get out there and root myself in it. Obviously, working in it also establishes some credibility. Having an MBA gives me a little bit of credibility there too. But it is something I have to actually work at and think about, making sure that I not only do those things and learn, but also make them public too and make them known.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it up
Yeah, good.
here. Do we have one last question from Ava? One last comment? Yeah, let's end it on a high
I
note.
always had I had the last question. But how come entrepreneurs are more likely to listen to customers more than the typical average corporate America? Because I feel like corporate America doesn't really listen to people, customers as much. What do you say to that?
I think it depends on the company. I think some companies do a really good job with listening to customers, and it's part of their tenets and their philosophy. It may not be all of them. It's hard as you get big to still have channels and ways to talk to customers, whereas it's crucial for us. And we're also very much on the ground. Our company's small. We don't have a customer support team. It's us. So we're, naturally just doing it. But when you get bigger, you can outsource that customer support team. So now there's just another step to get a little bit closer. So it's because as you get bigger, you just add more layers. It doesn't mean that there aren't companies that do it really well, though. But you have to plan for it. You have to set structures and in place for it, and you have to make that part of your culture.
It's operational excellence, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. It's operation. It's an operations problem.
All right, we'll end it there. So let's give Sara a round of applause. Great job.